Greetings, Moralis Pro community. Phil here, your head of research at Moralis, and this is one of our special public streams. So if you're seeing this for the first time, if you're seeing me for the first time, then I want you to know that you're getting a sneak peek into a weekly live stream experience that we make available only to our pro customers. And if you want to know more about Moralis.com, check out the link below. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go. Today, we're joined by one of our friends from Axelar, Yoros, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about what is new over at Axelar. If you've been part of Moralis and our communities, you know that Axelar is one of our partners and that they provide a leading cross-chain solution with a lot of functionality for people looking to manage cross-chain tokens, take tokens cross-chain. Other things are possible like cross-chain liquidity and things like that. And many of those steps and tutorials are available over on our Moralis for Developers channel. The focus of this will be to talk about it from a DeFi user, trader, investor perspective in terms of what we're excited about that's maybe been released recently or coming out soon. And we're also going to talk about some of the things that are on our schedule over at Moralis.com Pro for the holiday season. And so with all that said, Yoros, tell us a little bit about what you do over at Axelar as we get started here today.
Phil, thank you so much for having me. Excited to talk to the community. I always love to start with the founding story of Axelar and how we got here. So if that's okay, let me do that.
Absolutely.
Personally, I'm from Greece, so crypto just made a lot of sense. Always, we had a lot of problems with the banking system. Many of you will remember 10 years ago, we had a lot of issues with the banks, capital controls. People could not take money out of their banks, right? So back in the day, when me and my co-founder Sergey were students at MIT, we started working Silvio Micali, the founder of Algorand. The three of us were the three-person founding team of the Algorand blockchain, one of the first proof-of-stake blockchains to launch in the space. And really the vision was simple. How can we make a fast and easy-to-use blockchain that billions of people in the world can use so that no one can tell you what to do with your money? And it's this vision that we've been expanding on with Axelar over the past few years. So long story short, once we launched Algorand back in 2019, we realized that it's very, very hard to bring users to a non-EVM chain or any chain outside of Ethereum. Back then, all of the DeFi users were on Ethereum. That's where all of the liquidity was. And you start to think, okay, well, I need to bridge those users over. How do I do it? And the answer was simply interoperability. How can you allow users to take their assets from one chain, simply bridge it over to another chain to use that technology? And that was about 5 years ago. And really, we had two paths. We can start building this for Algorand or build it for the wider ecosystem. We had very high conviction that there's going to be hundreds, if not like thousands or millions of chains. And we can talk more about that and why even a million chains make sense. And in such a world, interoperability is going to be crucial, not just for DeFi users, but for the technology as a whole to be usable, right? Because imagine you're a user on one chain, you have an application on another chain. If there's no easy way to use your assets from Ethereum on an application on Solana, you're not going to be able to do anything interesting with the technology. So interoperability at its basis really makes Web3 usable, right? That's what it does.
Absolutely. Now, I agree with that 100%. And I also agree with what you were talking about in terms of this multi-chain future. So for those of you who don't know, over in the Moralis Pro community, one of the things that we are weekly doing is exploring different protocols in DeFi. There are literally hundreds of different protocols that we've explored as a community in the past year or two. And all of those exploration videos are available for our pro users to view. In fact, Axelar is one of the ecosystems that we cover in our Bull Run course. Now, the reason why I say all of that is, number one, I want you guys to know about the education opportunities that we have on Moralis Pro. But number two, I want to talk a little bit about how we see that emerging right now. And this might even be a good time for for us to just take a quick look at the Axelar Block Explorer, because I know that there are some really nice visual enhancements that show the communication happening in real time between chains. And for anybody who's hearing about this for the first time, I want to put that picture in their mind. And I see you're sharing your screen right here. Let me pull that up here. Okay, perfect. So here is, and I'll let Euros talk a little bit about this himself here in a second, but I love the fact that this really helps us to immediately visualize what's happening in this cross-chain reality that we live in at this point. Because if you're seeing this for the first time, we're here to tell you that interoperability between blockchains is a reality today. If you have assets on one blockchain and you need those over on another, it's already possible. And one of the leaders in that space is Axelar. And I love the way you guys have your Block Explorer visualizing that. Did you want to add any more here before I ask my next question? Because I'm going to follow this up with a question about what you're seeing in terms of usage across all of these chains as we enter this new bull cycle here.
Yeah, generally, like with this image, I like to talk about why we designed Axelar that way. So what you see on the screen in front of you is a blockchain connecting blockchains. Right? So Axelar itself is a proof-of-stake blockchain with 75 validators. You can find all of the validators on the Axelar Scan website. It's fully open source, fully decentralized. But why did we build it that way? Right? And it comes down to security and scalability. We can talk about this now, or maybe I can add later, but you're driving the conversation.
No, let's go into that, because I think this is getting a little beyond what I was talking about, but it's a perfect time to address it. So speaking generally, for anybody who's kind of getting caught up on this topic, when you have two blockchains and you want to move assets between those two blockchains, there's a few primitives which have been established to make that possible. One of those, which is used by Axelar, is called mint and burn, where we're actually minting new coins on the destination chain and then burning those coins on the origin chain in order to maintain a constant supply across all of those chains. And that's easier to do than ever when we use things like the interchain or cross-chain communication service. I'm probably saying that wrong. ITS is I know what it's called over on Axelar. But if you want to elaborate a bit here on why having a blockchain facilitate that interaction is important as opposed to a private protocol or a private database, I think that's a great thing for us to touch on here. We've seen, those of us who've been in this space for a while, the downfall of protocols with too many centralization components, especially when it comes to interoperability. How does Axelar overcome those obstacles with having a network facilitated?
Okay, a few things to unpack here. So at the foundational level, Axelar does not mint and burn assets across chains, does not do cross-chain swaps. All those are things that are built a layer above. Axelar itself as a network passes messages from one network to another. That's it. Right? And on top of this message passing network, we have built developer tooling that developers can tap into to build their own applications. So you can build things like cross-chain lending, where you collateralize an asset on Arbitrum and get a loan on Avalanche. Right? So you can think of it as a fully Turing-complete cross-chain platform where anything you can build on a single chain, you can now build spanning across different chains. Right? And I can talk a little bit more about how I see this playing out for developers. But before that, what you mentioned, there's been so many hacks in the interoperability space. Billions of dollars lost over the last few years. And the number one cause by far for these hacks is centralization. You have a company that's claiming to be decentralized. Of course, no one can validate it, right? They can claim whatever they want. And then when they get hacked, well, it turns out that the founder had some ledger in his back pocket, or like his friends had some keys stored in their personal computers. And when the attacker managed to get access to those keys, all of the funds were inevitably lost, right? And this was what we tried to solve as the number one priority with Axelar. How do you solve for centralization? And the only answer is you need to have a blockchain, because that's the only way we know how to create a decentralized validator set. blockchains were created to decentralize the infrastructure for money, right? They're the internet for money, and they're very secure because they're decentralized. So we took all the learnings from the blockchain space and we applied it to interoperability as well. And to this day, Axelar has been live for 3 years, and it is still the only platform that leverages proof-of-stake decentralized technology to connect blockchains. Everything else has some centralization point. Some of them are a little further than one validator, right? They have more than one validator, but fully decentralized, Axelar is the only one. And the best way to accomplish this is by creating a blockchain that connects different blockchains.
Absolutely. And that's consistent with many of the things that we've explored in the Bull Run course that I was mentioning earlier. While we actually do dive deep on all sorts of interoperability solutions, it is rare and consistent with what you were saying there, Yoros, that we have here a verifiably decentralized network that's playing that relayer component between the networks. And if you want to know more about that, check out the Cosmos section of our Bull Run course. And if you're not a member of Moralis Pro yet, hit that link below and check it out. Now, let's talk a little bit more about what I was asking about earlier. And or did you want to talk about the developer aspect next? Because I know that you mentioned that there's some unique enhancements for this for developers, and we hadn't quite touched on that yet.
Exactly. So as a developer, you can use the Axelar SDK to launch on one chain and Axelar users everywhere. Over the last few months, and probably over the last year, we started seeing a pattern where big successful applications from Ethereum mainnet started launching their own layer 1s or layer 2s. The most recent example being Uniswap with Unichain, but we've seen also some of the biggest paired protocols like DYDX, now Hyperliquid, which was always its own chain, Avo, which launched its own layer 2. It seems clear that all of the biggest applications are trying to be on their own chains, and there's a lot of benefits to that, right? They can earn more revenue from their users instead of paying to the validators of the layer 1. You get better scalability advantages because you don't have to share block space with other users of other applications, which ends up being cheaper for your users. There's a lot of benefits to having an application on its own chain. And then, of course, we have Solana, we have Sui, we have Ton, all chains that are doing great things and with a lot of staying power. So applications are going to be on their own chains, be it a high-performance chain or their own layer 1, layer 2. And in such a world, we don't want to tell developers, deploy your application on 10 different chains if you want to access users from one chain. You're going to deploy on one chain, and then by connecting to the Axelar SDK, you can allow users to initiate a transaction on any chain, and under the hood, the asset gets bridged over to the chain where your application lives, and it interacts with your application. But the user never has to leave their origin chain or even know that they're leaving a chain. Right? So this is really the vision of interoperability, where as a user, you will be able to go to an application on your phone. You say, I want to deposit some funds on this application. Right? Open a position. The funds may be on Solana. The application's on Avalanche. They get routed under the hood, and you don't have to think about bridging chains or anything like that. It's similar experience to Web2 today, and you can already start building in this new paradigm as a developer.
Well, and it's really interesting that you say that because, and this is, I want to kind of bring this full circle for anybody who's maybe used DeFi a little bit, but isn't quite grasping the possibilities here. So, and I'll use this, use a really practical example here that everybody's aware of. Go over to Uniswap right now, over at uniswap.org. And when you go over to Uniswap and you look at the different chains that they support, you're going to see a pull down menu. And that pull down menu is going to basically ask you to select which chain you're working with, right? Well, what has Uniswap done? They've gone and taken their AMM solution and they've deployed it to multiple chains. So you can use it across these different chains. But they're actually each separate siloed instances of their smart contracts that don't, in most cases, have any underlying connectivity to them. So if you've got $100 over on Optimism and you want to trade for $100 worth of Ethereum over on Arbitrum, for example, you actually need to use a separate bridge protocol to accomplish that. And it's going to involve all these different, transactions that you're going to need to approve, basically 5 transactions or more to accomplish that one thing that I just said. Now, you could say, oh, well, it's up to the user to go and figure this out. But when we're trying to move towards mass adoption and we're trying to make these steps and these functions more accessible to more people as more people enter the space, then we need solutions that simplify what we're doing. And I think that this lends itself really well to that, in the sense that you're suggesting that Uniswap, and we're using them as an example, guys, because they're the number one AMM, but Uniswap is building it wrong, because using Axelar, they could build all this in a way where the user connects their wallet regardless of what network the assets are on. They're able to interact with all of those things and basically perform that trade that I was just talking about using a single transaction, or maybe 2 if we're talking about the approval transaction as well.
Yes, and that's why they're launching their own chain, right? So this is the direction.
Right. So maybe I use a bad example, because they are in fact launching their own chain. Now, how does that, when you have these projects that are looking to launch their own chain to essentially reproduce the functionality that we're talking about, that Axelar could provide for them without them launching their own chain. My question as like a scientist in this industry, because that's really what I am at the end of the day. I test different protocols and then I teach our community how to use them. From my perspective, I'm thinking, why are they reinventing the wheel? Why are they launching yet another chain instead of using these solutions like the Axelar tech we're talking about? Or am I missing the point here? Is there a way that their vision for a solo chain meshes well with what Axelar is doing? Maybe you can help sort that out for us a little bit.
The latter. Yeah, so you can launch your own chain, and by using Axelar, you will be able to abstract away all the complexities of using that chain, right? So and you might as well use your own chain instead of be on an existing chain, so that you can direct any revenue from the application to your users, like your token holders, instead of having to pay someone else. And maybe just to elaborate on the example you gave about a decentralized exchange. And maybe we'll talk about not even launching on a new chain, right? Let's say you want to replicate the user experience of a centralized exchange, but as a decentralized exchange. So if we take one of the high performance chains, Sui, they have their own order book on top called Deepbook. So as a developer, as long as your wallet is compatible with different chains, right? As a user, if your wallet is compatible with different chains, let's say you have Phantom, you will have the same seed phrase across Solana, across a lot of the EVM chains. And now with Phantom launching Sui last week, you will be able to access Sui as well. So you will be able to build the following user experience for users, where you can display a front end that's very similar to Binance or Bybit. You can tell the user, deposit some funds. They will be able to deposit some funds from anywhere in the space. The funds, of course, will still remain on their Phantom, because it's the same private key that's securing your public key across all chains. And then a user will be able to transact on the order book on Sui. They won't even have to know they are on Sui. And then they can withdraw as well directly. So you will be able to build these centralized exchange user experiences on a decentralized platform, and users will not have to, go and register on the platform. So there's much lower barrier of entry. All that you need is to bring market makers and liquidity on that new chain, that new venue. But from a technological perspective, there's no blocker. You can replicate 100% the same user experience.
And now you mentioned an interesting thing there that I don't know if all of our viewers realize is relatively new for the space. So on-chain order books are a pretty new advancement for blockchain tech. Blockchain tech traditionally, and I'm talking about since about 2019, 2020, performed on-chain exchange using a model known as the automatic market maker, which involves liquidity pools where users have deposited two separate assets to the pool in order to facilitate exchanges. And the price is determined based on the ratio of those assets within the pool. Now, there are some additional complexities that, of course, we get into in our bull run course, but the point there being that that is the original exchange model, and it's fundamentally different from an order book model that's used by central exchanges. Now, when we say that things like SUI are introducing an on-chain order book, this is potentially a new primitive. We've seen something similar from XRP Ledger or XRPL. With the way that their tech works, and not necessarily saying that one is better than the other, but one idea that I'm having right now, and tell me if this makes sense to you, but would it be possible with the integration of these new chains that include an order book to actually use that order book to store orders for another chain using Axelar? Is that something that's possible? And I know I'm just brainstorming here. I hope I'm not throwing too much of a curveball.
Are you looking to start a company? But you are. The right way to implement this on the low level is bridge the asset over. So you would create a wrapped representation of the asset. And I know people don't like the word wrapped, but it's really because of all the hacks that happen. But if you do it well, it's totally fine. So you would create a wrapped representation of the assets, any asset on SUI. So you would create, a wrapped OP token, a wrapped ARP token, a wrapped SOL token. And then the market makers would use those wrap tokens to provide liquidity on the SUI order book. As a user, of course, you would just deposit an asset. You would never know it's wrapped or not. You would see it on the front end. You would place your limit order or your market order on the order book and then withdraw, right? So you can imagine that someone on SUI or XRPL, even, as you mentioned, another close partner of Axelar, you will be able to deposit assets from any chain, right? Not just local to SUI, but you can really create these global liquidity hubs where users can transact with their assets from any chain.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's actually very interesting, and I love the answer that you gave there. Now, for anybody who is a little confused, let me see if I can explain this in just a little bit different way to help. Now, we were talking about wrapping tokens. Now, this is something that I've explained in our tutorials as a lockbox key mechanism or a coupon mechanism, because basically what you have when you are wrapping a token or wrapping a copy of a token on a different chain is you're locking that token within a lockbox, and then you're creating a coupon version on the other chain representative of the value. So long as that lockbox is maintained and secure, then the value of that token on the destination chain is equally secure via the redemption mechanism that's maintained by the same custodian on the lockbox. So this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. If that lockbox control is centralized, then all of a sudden you have what we call in this business a honeypot. Something where if that's easily accessed by anybody, they can simply take all of the assets there. What do we have with Axelar? Well, we have that lockbox, if you like that analogy, being controlled by a decentralized protocol that maintains a blockchain consensus. And that's the same mechanism that secures things like the Bitcoin network, like the Ethereum network. Why is it not possible for me to go and spend my neighbor's coins on the Bitcoin network? Well, it's because of the consensus provided by the network. And that's the exact same type of security that we're looking at with Axelar. Do you have anything to add on that? I just wanted to, explain that a little bit different way for anybody who's hearing these things for the first time.
That was clear. And yeah, a wrapped asset is just a representation of the asset on a new chain, right? And there's no way to avoid it. If you want to bring an asset to an application that's built on a chain, you have to wrap it under the hood. But the user will not have to know, right? The user just sees an asset and an application, and that's it. But I do want to emphasize that for the future of a lot of the DeFi primitives on different chains, because they will be built on their own chains, you will have to wrap assets under the hood in order to use assets on those applications. And this is not a bad thing, but a lot of people worry about wrapped assets because of all the hacks. But if you do it well, again, it's just another asset that you're creating a representation for on a new chain.
I agree 100%. I think that term has kind of gotten a bad reputation, but in reality, we need to start to frame our understanding with respect to how we understand traditional finance. And that might sound weird coming from a blockchain native guy like me, but it's actually true. Because take a look, for example, at the proposition from the stock market for when you want to buy gold certificates. Well, you give them cash and they give you a piece of paper that says it's worth gold. Why is that worth gold? Well, because you trust them as a custodian. Okay. And here's how blockchain tech moves beyond that, but in a very similar way. We don't have to trust Axelar organization to secure these assets. They're secured by the blockchain that we have an opportunity as users and DeFi investors to participate in. So when I take my own Axelar assets or AXL assets and I stake those within the native protocol, I'm participating in the consensus of that protocol. So it's not just other people that I'm trusting that this is secure. I'm trusting the swarm, the collective that is securing the network, much like we have with Bitcoin and Ethereum, but for the purposes of this cross-chain communication that we're talking, and for securing the value of those tokens on chain. Very, very good stuff. And guys, as always, if you want to know more about staking assets, not only on this network, but definitely on Axelar, that's something we go over in the Bull Run course. Check the link below. Or if you're interested in a trial, reach out to our support team, support@moralis.com can help you with that. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what you guys are seeing lately from the different protocols using your network. Is there anything, because obviously we've got this grand vision of what we hope to see here soon. What kind of steps are we seeing towards that direction? Or is there anything new in terms of the Axelar chain itself that's coming out soon that we should be excited about if we're interested in this type of tech?
Great. So one thing we realized over the past year is this model I mentioned earlier, where people are not going to have to deploy on 10 different chains. They're going to deploy on one chain. And their main requirement from interoperability providers is to bridge assets over, right? Those more general use cases where you can pass messages and do like more complex things, for 90% of the use cases, they are about assets. So people want to be able to bridge an asset over and get a loan, or bridge an asset over and swap, right? But they do want to bridge an asset as part of the operation. After all, payments and asset transfers and tokenization is the biggest use case of blockchain today. So with Axelar, over the past year, we have prioritized tokenization as a use case, doing a lot of work with real-world asset issuers, been doing a lot of work with Ripple to support XRP expansion to other ecosystems. I don't know if you saw that, but they're launching a new EVM chain, and they're going to use Axelar to bridge XRP over from the XRPL to the EVM chain so people can pay for gas. They're deploying their real USD, which just got approval yesterday. They want to deploy it on many, many different chains. But all those use cases, again, are around asset transfers. And this is the core focus for us. We want to make it as easy as possible to launch assets on as many chains as possible.
Now, I know that RPL or XRPL has a RWA protocol. I'm not sure exactly how it's implemented, but I have read a bit on it. And so I know, of course, it would be possible for them to issue RWAs and then for Axelar to make those available on other networks. Is that what you're talking about? Or are you guys actually working with the direct issuance of RWAs yourself as well?
Both. I mean, on the Ripple side, we'll have to see. We'll have to follow their lead. The one thing we're doing for sure that's been announced is taking XRP from the XRPL and moving it to the new chain so people can use it to pay gas. So very, very close collaboration there. But we are working with real-world asset issuers. There is a dashboard. There's a great dashboard that tracks the real world asset issuers across different verticals. Let me present real quick. You're probably familiar with RWA.xyz. And if you look at some of the most popular asset classes like US Treasuries, which is the category in which BlackRock also tokenized their Beetle product, the top two entities by TVL, Hasnode, and Ondo are both using Axelar under the hood for their security. And the idea is that they're deploying natively their assets on many different chains. But as a user, what if you want to take an asset from one chain and bridge it over to another chain? Well, you have this native mint and burn functionality that you yourself mentioned earlier, where, of course, you do need to work with the developer of the applications. It's not permissionless like the wrapped assets approach. Here, they have to integrate the messaging functionality so that a user can burn 1 unit of their token on Ethereum and mint 1 unit of their token on Solana. And the biggest players in this category, in particular, the top two that you see here, are both working with Axelar to facilitate these flows.
Very nice, very nice. So is the and this is something that I've wondered, this may be a little bit outside of the realm of what we're talking about, but relates to what I was mentioning earlier with relating some of this back to traditional finance for anybody who's hearing about these concepts for the first time. When you have RWAs like this, how's the connection between the real world asset and the value maintained? Because obviously when working with native blockchain assets, we can oftentimes use a combination of our AMM price with the central exchange price, which is automatically arbitraged based on the natural incentive there to figure out the global price. Do we have other mechanisms going on here? Is there an oracle in play that's that maintaining that on-chain price, or how does that work? And just from a high level perspective, I don't know that we necessarily need to go in the exact methods, but I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, typically those assets, they have on-chain representations, and there is collateral in the bank secured by the issuer in a bank account, and it's usually just a regular, US Treasury bonds. And they take the yield. The issuer takes the yield that is off-chain and distributes it to the on-chain asset periodically, maybe once a day. They just update the price of the asset so that people have the latest price. And typically, the price of these assets is represented versus some other stablecoin, either USDC or USDT, and they create liquidity pools on-chain through which people can buy those assets or sell those assets for the other popular stablecoins, which are Tether and USDC today. Right. So you are always, like, for assets that are liquid, you're always going to have an on-chain price because they're going to have liquidity on some DEX. And I think that's true for all of the big assets here, right? They have reasonably deep on-chain liquidity, so you can always swap in and out if you're a DeFi user.
I see. So there's some kind of like redemption mechanism that allows for arbitrage to take place between the real world equivalent and the on-chain price, I would assume. That's certainly what we see with crypto assets between a central exchange and the on-chain price. You have the on-chain price produced by
Absolutely.
the AMM, and if they drift apart, well, all of a sudden you buy the cheap one, sell it at the place where it's expensive. Not that anybody could do this quick enough, because at this day and age that's done by bots. Is there something similar you can do with these RWAs? I know we're talking about the bond one where you can redeem it for the actual bond.
It's exactly the same mechanism that is used for stable coins, right? The stable coin, why is it pegged to the dollar? Because there is collateral. So if people are dumping a stable coin very aggressively, some big market maker is going to buy back, and they have access to the issuer, and they can go and claim the collateral, right? So if they trust the issuer, they know they can always claim the collateral. So this is the force, right? These are the driving forces, the market makers that are going to keep the harmony, to maintain the balance across the on-chain pools and the off-chain prices, right? Very simply because if people are dumping on-chain and the collateral is there, you're going to buy and you're going to profit from the arbitrage.
Interesting. Now it seems like these RWA bonds that you're talking about would make for ideal collateral for a stablecoin project, because they're always gaining value relative to the dollar. So you would always have excess necessarily, assuming that the protocols are, maintained correctly and that there's no fear that people would lose everything due to a hack or something like that. But is that consistent with your understanding? Do you know of any projects that have attempted to build something like that?
All of those projects here, they're earning about 4% interest annually. And this is great because the first step with crypto was to get sound money to the hands of every single person in the world, right? And there's a lot of people in emerging countries that use USDT on Tron, for example, or USDC on Celo. It's used a lot in Africa to hold money and transact. And in Argentina, it's the same. But this is already much better than holding their local currencies, which get inflated by 100% a year. But what if they wanted to have a savings account? And if they want to have a savings account, this is actually even better, right? Because if you go to your bank, they're going to give you lower interest rates than treasury bonds. If you have bonds on chain, people will be able to earn at this point in time about 4% a year. And assuming the issuer does everything well, there is no risk to those protocols, right? Because it's fully backed by equivalent of a dollar in the bank, right? So this is a way of taking the savings account primitive, bringing it on chain, and making it accessible to every human who has a smartphone.
Now, it seems to me that as the demand for stable coins increases on chain or stablecoin equivalent assets, and the need for the US government to issue debt increases, there might become at a certain point an opportunity for direct bond issuance on chain. And of course, I mean, this is a crazy thing that I'm talking about, guys. This is something that if I was talking about this 4 years ago, people would really think that I'm insane. But now that we have the situation we have politically in the United States, without going into deep details on that, and many of the discussions around that have to do with things like Bitcoin strategic reserve and the more clear framework of how we would issue stable coins. Do you guys see direct issuance of bonds on chain by the US government something that is possible within the next couple of years? And if so, is that something that you guys would be wanting to help facilitate?
Within the next couple of years, I think those are the key words. If we look at a long enough time horizon, 100%, there's no doubt, right? Everything will be digitized, and it's the same thing that happens with any technology, right? The better technology eventually just overcomes and replaces the old technology. The open market will always find a way to remove inefficiencies, right? And the existing financial system has a lot of inefficiencies. Is it going to happen in the next 4 years? That's honestly, I have no idea. I did see an interview from Eric Trump. I think it was like 1 or 2 days ago, and he was talking about the same thing. It's like it's so much more efficient to do things on chain, on the blockchain, which I was like, okay. If they're talking about those things, maybe. There's definitely appetite from the administration, or we shouldn't say definitely, but they've demonstrated a lot of appetite to do things differently this time around. So it remains to be seen. I think the bottleneck will be in the implementation phase, as with everything, right? Because you have to take the existing system, just migrate everything on chain. That will take time. But personally, I believe there's definitely appetite from the administration, and we'll have to wait and see. Right? It's definitely not my expertise, but on a long enough time frame, everything will be tokenized, everything will be on chain. It's so much more efficient than the system we have today.
Absolutely. And no, I'm glad to hear that answer, because it's very much in line with what I'm always telling our community here. And that is that at the end of the day, we spend a lot of time in our industry talking about this chain versus this chain, this protocol versus this protocol. Is this one going to be the quote, this chain killer, Ethereum killer, Solana killer, whatever you have? And the reality is that we're working with a technology which is fundamentally superior to the economic technology that runs the entire world. By which I mean there is no centralized government controlled system which is superior to blockchain when it comes to transparency, reliability, speed, global access, you name it. Every single one of these is done better by some sort of solution in blockchain, if not done better by multiple ones. And so when you realize that, when you wake up to that reality that we are experimenting, developing, playing with some days technology that will replace the most mainstream economic technology the world over, then you start to ask questions which are maybe beyond what we can definitely put our finger on. This is how long it's going to take. And this is my bullish answer to when you hear people talking about, oh, quantum computing, look at how fast it's progressing. Isn't that going to pose a problem for crypto? And my main answer to that is to give them a different question, which is, with all the things that we are iterating on, developing on, how long before traditional accounting methods are considered irresponsible, dangerous, and inappropriate for any sort of public professional use? Because in crypto, we're already there. If you're storing money in any other method than the blockchain, you're already behind where we're at in this industry. And we do want to help you get caught up. And that's what the Moralis Pro experience is all about. All right. So now that I'm done pontificating a little bit on that point, I want to again say this is why it's so exciting to have Axelar on the stage with us, because this is a protocol which not only sees this multi-chain future where we're absorbing all the databases, all the public databases of the world into permissionless systems, then you start to see the need for all these chains. Then you start to see the need to connect all these chains for it to actually work the way that it's supposed to. And then finally, we have a solution which does exactly that. And furthermore, it's a solution that we can, of course, like all crypto solutions, invest in using the blockchain as well. I do see we have got a couple of questions here in the chat, but before we move over to those, did you have any other points you wanted to make today? We're in our last 15 minutes here, so I want to make sure we don't. If there was anything you were waiting to share, I want to make sure we have time for it first. Oh, you're muted right now.
Just one quick thing I think you also touched on is we're at a point in the lifetime of the industry where we have enough infrastructure. We have enough technological innovation. We don't need more technological innovation. We don't need more R&D. Let's just get people to use the products, right? And that's why I'm very excited about tokenization. It's so easy to use, right? It's on-chain. Yes, there are some UX barriers, but any human in the world can now hold funds on their phone, or they can take a password, store it anywhere they want. There are a few different approaches, right? We have to make this as dead simple to use as possible, and then we can figure out more complex use cases, right? But even that is game-changing for billions of people in the world. So I've personally been doing deep research for a long time, and now my focus has shifted on how can we make the technology as easy to use. And that's why with Axelar, moving forward, again, our number one priority is going to be moving assets across chains, which is the key use case. How do we make it that simple? And for that, as a first step, we have created the front end where anyone can go. Let me just switch. Here we go. So we have this front end. I won't demo it because it will take 2-3 minutes, but effectively you type any token address you want, and with one click, you are going to be able to determine a set of chains where you wanna, okay, this token was already added, but effectively you enter your token address, it pops up a set of chains, and you click which chains you want, and with one click, one transaction, you can take that asset cross-chain, and it gives you a front end through which you can move it. Right? So we made it that simple for any developer, any asset issuer. You actually don't even have to be a developer to deploy an asset on any VM chain they want. And this is very soon coming for Sui, for Solana, and the XRPL as well.
Guys, some of you maybe heard me say on another call before that this solution that we're looking at right here, this is the key to proper cross-chain token management for many projects out there. I don't know how many times I've seen a project mint X number of tokens on a new chain because they're trying to expand the chains that they're working with. And all of a sudden that day, their community is dumping their token because they think that they're increasing the supply, when really they're just trying to manage a cross-chain supply, and they're not using a protocol that facilitates this in the best way. Axelar does, and that's something we took a look at over on our Moralis for Developers channel. If you want to see more on that, it's really, really nice the way that it does it. And you guys can see in the video, I'm pretty excited when I see, oh, and it managed it between both chains. That's amazing. It sounds like a simple thing, but it's something that we didn't have for years in this industry. And as a result, there was a lot of circulating FUD around things that there didn't need to be. And now that we have the solution to overcome that, wanted to grab a couple questions here in the chat. I see one from PG. He's asking specifically about PundiX and FunctionX ecosystems. Now, I have an answer for this, but I want to give you a chance to, if there's anything special you guys are doing with those networks, or maybe just to explain again how that interoperability is available there as well. Oh,
yes. To be honest, I'm not completely sure. I know we're bridging some tokens over for FunctionX. If there's further functionality, maybe that's the case. There's so many developers and projects using Axelar that it's sometimes hard to stay on top of them. But yeah, Phil, if you have any insights, feel free to add.
Yeah, so those are two networks we haven't taken a look at a whole lot recently. Okay, so if there's extra interest in that, reach out to me in one of the channels in the Moralis Discord. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about what protocols they're developing over there that we really want to go deep on, and together we can explore it more. That offer is open for any pro member to bring up any chain they want us to take a closer look at, because we're happy to. I mean, that's what we're here to do, guys. Make sure that we don't miss anything going on in this exciting space, and then exercise our capital in any ways that we choose to while working in crypto. So that said, guys.
Sorry, yeah, I'm actually just looking on our Telegram chat with them. Yeah, it sounds like we bridged their assets over to Base because they wanted to make the asset available to a new audience, and they set up some liquidity pools on Aerodrome, right? So just giving access to their assets to more users on more chains, as simple as that.
So, PG, the answer to that would be yes. You're going to be able to use it to convert assets from FX to another chain. It may not support every asset right off the bat, but as they roll that out, it will.
Exactly.
One other thing I wanted to share with you guys today, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. This is, and I forgot to mention this earlier, but this is the unofficial kickoff to our holiday season over at Moralis Pro. We've got new events coming each week of the holiday season, special live streams, and I'm going to go ahead and fill this in with specific dates as we go, but this is our little Christmas calendar. I'm going to distribute this in our Discord following the stream, so anybody who is interested in checking up on these events, look for that link here later on today. I'll also include a calendar link so you guys can add it to your Google Calendar if that's helpful to you. And please, guys, reach out to me if you have any questions on this in our Moralis Pro Discord. Looking forward to a great holiday season with you guys while we explore some awesome tech together. All right. Well, on that note, Euros, it was so great to have you here with us today, and thank you for coming and representing Axelar today. Is there anything else before we finish up today that, as DeFi users, we should have on our radar as we move into the first quarter of 2025, or maybe the first half year? Do you guys have any exciting things on your roadmap that we may want to mark our calendars for?
Well, Axelar is going to be launching integrations first with Sui, then with XRPL, and both ecosystems have exciting initiatives that, maybe some things I shouldn't disclose, but use Axelar to onboard to some of the new ecosystems that we're going to be connecting. And there's going to be a lot of opportunities for yield in those ecosystems, right? Particularly like XRPL, the EVM they're launching, and Sui is also doing a lot of great work. And personally, from a technical standpoint, I love the Sui team. They've done very deep technical work for 3, 4, 5 years before they even launched the chain. So out of the high throughput chains, I think they're going to do incredibly well, right? So try some new chains. Axelar is going to make it incredibly easy to onboard to those chains, and follow us on X as well, so that you know when we go live and you're one of the first to take advantage of the new bridging opportunities in those ecosystems.
I was going to mention that, guys. Make sure if you're interested in catching any additional updates as they come out, as they become available, make sure to follow Axelar over on X. I'm going to go ahead and pull up that page here for anybody. That one right here at Axelar is the correct account. And of course, I'm following them as well. So yeah, keep an eye here. Now, in addition to that, guys, if you want access to me, you want to ask me some questions about the things we talked about today. Maybe you have questions about getting started in crypto, setting up your wallet, hardware wallets, networks, things like that. I am available all the time for our pro community members over in our Discord. And I encourage all of you pro members to reach out to me with questions at any time. And if you're interested in asking me questions, click that link below or reach out to our support team, support@moralis.com, for some trial options. They can present some trial options to you if you want to check it out for yourself before buying. All right. On that note, I want to thank everybody for joining here today. Another thank you to Yoros, and hope you guys all have a great start to your holiday season here. We're going to be with you guys doing live streams every single week for our pro users through the end of the new year. And I'm sure that I'll see some of you who are not pro users yet in the next video where we have a special guest. You guys all have a great day, and thanks again. We'll see you in the next video.